Welcome to Inner Peace, Better Health, where soulful living meets creative expression. I'm your host, Shreya. Today's guest is Rachel, a global art curator, technologist, fashion visionary, and healing guide through the artistic realm. From her work with Vogue Italia to her series in the pursuit of art, fashion, technology, Rachel has lived at the crossroads of creativity and consciousness. Today, we'll explore how artistic meditation not only heals but redefines our connection with spirit and self. So, welcome, Rachel.
Thank you. Thanks for the kind introduction. Hope you're doing well today.
Yes, I'm doing well, and I am honored to have you on my show. So, Rachel, you live in a world of high end fashion and fine art. What first led you to explore the intersection of that world with inner healing and meditation?
Well, it's been a long journey. I would say that art's been in my life since childhood and has been a constant line in my life. And when it comes to my multiple decade career in art and fashion, I've had the beauty of being around creatives who've led me on a path of understanding and deeper insight into their creative processes, their ideas about the world, and contemplation and quiet moments with art now has been universally studied and reviewed by big universities and scientists around the world, talking about how one can improve one's mood, self-awareness,
Yeah,
reduce of anxiety and depression. And so for me, on a personal note, it's a very art can be intimidating, but yet it can also be a very personal thing. So for me, I find meditation and mindfulness in experiencing art and also in fashion. So,
yeah, that's wonderful. And was there a moment when art transformed from expression to a sacred practice for you?
for me, yes, I would say that I didn't really understand that I was going through a practice when
Yeah,
times of crisis and things in my life would go stressful or bad, or there was loss or trauma or breakup or something that would happen among friends. I'd find myself going back to a place of solitude in front of a painting or a piece of artwork. And I found that I started kind of stating to other people that these places were my sanctuary. And so it just kind of turned into, a repetitive practice for me as a human, to find solace and quietness in absorbing art throughout my life, separate from my work. It was something that I did, in my spare time on a Sunday, or so for me, yes, it's walked itself into a very important practice in my life. I recently went through a very traumatic event in February of this year, and I found myself on planes and trains going to my favorite museums and spending hours there alone, just walking among, artwork, to find my center again. So yeah, I do believe there's a huge power in it, and something I believe in strongly.
yeah. And I think art has the power of spiritual hygiene. And with that, how does one cultivate that when pressure and burnout often dominate the scene?
Well, for me, and I can only speak from my personal experience, that moving into creativity, is also scientifically proven to reduce cortisol levels and stress. So if we're looking at PTSD or anxiety in any sorts, there's trauma symptoms or those kind of other ideas that happen with abuse survivors, veterans, different types of people. But just for the common person, um, it becomes a really important thing to stop and find a practice, that something that feeds your eyes. I mean, they do say cognitively, art makes your brain think faster. It creates neurons in your brain. And so when we think about meditation, this is also something that people talk about, that it also creates receptors and new neurons in your brain. So if you think about the body, it's, when we're all coming into this chaos in life, it's about coming into self-love. It's going inside rather than outside and sourcing information for yourself. So often people go back to things that maybe they resonated in childhood, or something that makes them feel peace. For me personally, it's art. For others, it could be creating art. For others, it's creating food. Anyone who's in the creative industry, one of my companies works across 40 different categories of creative arts and creative individuals that do multiple things. And meditation is part of that too. Yoga practice is part of that too. These are creative crafts that ignite the brain, but also bring you back to center and to your heart. And gives you, if anything, a couple minutes of quiet in your life when we have, like, the world moving so fast
Yes.
with technology and other things, right? So it's very important.
Yes. Technology will be there, but I think art is something that heals us from within, and that will be forever. It's an evergreen
Yes.
thing.
Yes,
And
I agree with you.
yes, and I think you have explored art, fashion, and technology together. So, how does artistic meditation help to bridge the seemingly opposite worlds of digital innovation and spiritual grounding?
Well, I think we have to look at these things as branches to one another. When you think of the clothes that you wear, the technology that you carry, and your body and your eyes, it's all a mechanism, right? So if you think about it, if iPhone, we're all kind of carrying our iPhone, we're carrying our phone with us every day. We are all tapped into technology, regardless if we like it or not. It's
Mm.
how you and I just connected and almost got disconnected by me trying to connect to you
Yes,
on this platform. And, that frustration can lead to stress and frustration, and should we cancel, and how do you move yourself away from these things? So when you think about technology, it can be your bridge. I mean, it brings me to you to have this conversation today. So if we look at these things as tools, and also tools for meditation and for practice and for the ability to connect with others, um, you know, people go into very different degrees of what technology is, but it is the branches that keep us connected, right? And in fashion, if you think about fashion, it's not always just the runway fashion. Your creative design of what you wear every day is an expression of yourself. So if you think you're not a creative person, well, you're going to your closet every day and putting on pants and shoes and creating your look for how you carry yourself in the world. And so all of these things, they carry an importance, and they do come together in both you as a human, but also, in the way that we all travel together in this technology. I built a platform for this, for people to create and collaborate, because I feel creative people, or people that are in the creative arts, it's very important to us in this day and age with the advent of AI and things moving so fast. We still thrive on the human connection. So, and the human voice, or music, or fashion, these things all interconnect. And so I think, in order to find your own meditative practice or your own daily practice to slow yourself, it's really finding out what those things are that make you happy.
yes,
So,
yes. And from there, I just have a question that pops into my mind that do you believe that technology can actually enhance the spiritual connection rather than hinder it?
well, I think if we look at technology, and, we look at how AI is informing us and educating us
Mm.
at a very high, fast pace. It reads much faster than we do. It brings in new dialogues. It makes us question different things. It may challenge us. It may make us think differently about something, and it also brings a huge historical value. So I think technology, in used in the right way, and if we look at safe AI and these other things, can be really beneficial to humanity. But at the same time, we also have to monitor that, and also be people that are humanists, and realize that the human brain is such more capacity than any computer could ever have. I still believe that. And so I think we have the ability to, continue to evolve as humans. And I think humanity is at stake a little bit with technology. We have to really monitor how we use it, how we engage with it. I see it in the art world. I see people walking through museums, looking through their phone before looking at the piece of art. That's a different experience. You're living your life through a screen. And that same kind of dopamine effect and that same serotonin is going to be the same if you're just standing in front of the painting without your phone in front of you. So we see it all the time in music concerts and events, and everyone has their phone and they're all looking through their phone rather than looking at the human on the stage. So I
Yes.
do hope that we all get more conscious about how we use technology and also how it affects us as humans and our mindfulness.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think technology can help us with art, but sometimes we use it in a very different way and in a very uh, like a non-useful way that uh,
Yes.
rather than helping us, it destroys us. And
Yes.
that are such rich connection that blending technology and spirit through art is really opens new dimensions. And thank you for illuminating that so beautifully. So meditation often evokes quiet and stillness, but for artists, they can movement, color, or design also serve as a meditative acts.
Yes, I do believe that. I mean, you can look at certain artists and in public spaces. I've worked with artists such as Anish Kapoor and other artists that affect community and space. I mean, these many of these artists are using large public artwork to have humans engage with it. And there are very, you're coming to find, and I see in a lot of museums, a lot of yoga groups, different groups coming into museums now, spending time with art, spending time in community. If you think of artwork and you think of how artists create art, it's meant to be for a social interaction. So you may not meet the artist, but the painting goes onto the wall, and then there's a group or community that come in and look at it, and so it does engage a kind of social mobility historically, for us to communicate, have a conversation about, debate, decide if we like it, we don't like it, if we want to sit with it by ourselves, if we want to sit with it with a group. So, I mean, there's so many things to look in that way. And so, yes, in terms of, if you think of just, pure meditation with, in your sitting and your day, we look at art as kind of a social, engagement, community, almost community meditation. If you look at people walking through a museum as a group, learning about a piece of art historically, on their headsets, and then I've often photographed people in museums when I was there, and I was just at the MoMA at a beautiful show, and I do watch how people interact with different pieces, how couples come up to things, how people sit with art. Some people sit far away and just sit, in a chair. Some people get up really close. I mean, when you think about color, texture, all these things that artists are giving us and reminding us of our sensory abilities, I think it's always engaged a cultural conversation historically. So, yeah.
I think art is everywhere. We just need the eye and the mind to see that and to capture that. I think art is
I,
everywhere in the environment.
yeah,
And
I agree.
from there, I have a question. I think our listeners might have the question too. That what practices do you personally return to when you need to realign or heal?
Well, that's a great question. I've been doing that quite a bit through the last few months. And I've been going back to things that are really of some of the things that I did in childhood. So I went back to horses, for instance. I went back to museums that really filled my light and spent time with artworks that reminded me things I've seen multiple times throughout my years, and revisited pieces in certain museums like the Musée d'Orsay. And then on top of that, I just spent a really lovely time with friends of mine who have a dog boarding company where they bring dogs to the beach, and they babysit dogs while people are traveling, and they have this beautiful company, and they do this out in the beach in Southampton, and that was a real healing moment for me because I got to spend time with animals. So there's these things that for me are really important. Meditation, and yoga practice, things that bring me back to center are really, really important in my life right now. And bring me a sense of real, true spiritual healing as well. By spending time with groups. I recently went and saw Gabor Mata speak in New York, discussing autoimmune disease and how to heal the body. And it was a very important lecture, really discussing the fact that we all are able to heal. It's just how do you do it, and how do you find your way through it? So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's really great. That's wonderful. And with such a dynamic global presence that you have, how do you stay rooted? And what's your ritual for reconnecting with your inner self when the external noise gets loud?
I do a lot of meditation. I meditate on planes. I do walking meditations. I do believe in the power of nature heals. I've believed in that for so long. So finding a place of nature where you can walk and spend time in air listening to the birds. So those are places that reset me, or going to the beach with animals. So these are things that reset my ability to continue to move. I do travel a lot, so I'm often on planes and in airports. And I do find music to be certain meditative music to be very calming and soothing in these environments, because you are hit by, multiple things when you're traveling in big cities. I was just in New York for Frieze Art Fair. There was hundreds of people walking by me, and I have to learn how to reintegrate into that kind of environment when I've come from an environment perhaps of very quiet solitude or in nature. So finding that balance, I'm still looking to find in my life. But it's always a constant challenge. But also I really take time each day to make sure that I give myself time in the morning and in the evening. And I do believe in manifestation and writing out your ideas. And so writing has been a huge tool in journaling. Um, as I try to do that throughout my years, and have published some of that work now. But I think it's really important, for just as my goals to continue to help creatives in the world and help humanity in a certain way, to keep creatives moving forward. It's very essential I keep moving forward as a human. So these are the tools I try to use. So
And what I have noticed that you were always surrounded by very aesthetic, that we now they use the word aesthetic, or maybe very artistic places, so that can
yeah.
help you too, for meditating and for staying in to yourself and to find your inner self.
Yeah, I went through quite a traumatic event, and a friend of mine invited me to her studio, and I was really caught in a very high PTSD moment.
Mhm.
And at that moment it changed me. She reminded me. She brought me this beautiful cheese board, which was like cheese from all around the world. She put it out. And
Okay.
I thought, what's going on? And she said, come to my studio, come into the studio. And I went into her studio, and her studio was these beautifully bright paintings, and not knowing so much about her work and not having a lot of verbal conversations with her over her work, I just felt a sense of peace. It put me back from this tragic moment of crying and disrupt in my life. And it gave me at least a 20-minute period where I just sat and I felt calm. And it gave me back a sense of safety and peace. And so, going through that myself and not really doing it on purpose. Okay. Mind you, my friend was like, are you okay? You just let me come scoop you up. And it really was transformative, and so has begun the journey of me discussing it, because I think I'm still trying to understand that process, but I also know that it transformed me and put me back into a very place of peace on the planet, if that makes sense. So I left her studio and I said, "Thank you so much for showing me your work." And wrote to
Mm.
her later and I said, your work is full of like happiness and joy. And I don't know if you mean that in your work or if that's something I just felt because of your kindness, and being surrounded by colorful painting. And she said, no, 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 my paintings are really meant to uplift and uphold people. And I'm glad you found that in my work. So you can sit there and talk about art as narrative and say, oh, this is why I painted this. But, often artists sometimes don't even know their impact, or sometimes they really do know what their message is. And often it's a much higher message than we realize. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. And what advice would you offer to someone craving creative clarity and spiritual stillness in their life?
Well, I think what's happened is that, I come from a world that people think is unattainable in a sense that, you go into a gallery and you're not, not everybody's invited, not everybody's able to experience that. So I do think that it's really important for people to think about their community and the people that are in their community, because often you will find a gallery, an art center, a place that, might be a free visit to an event, that someone's doing art or music. And I try to say to rally yourself, to try to get yourself up and just go. You don't have to know everything about the artist. You don't have to know everything about the cultural significance or anything. You can just be a human and go. And I think there's an intimidation that comes along with art that sometimes people are reluctant to want to go to these places, or they think they need to have something to attend them. Most art galleries in the world are free. You can go in and visit a gallery. A lot of museums have free nights. If you look it up in your local community, sometimes there's community centers. You can bring your family and draw and paint. So I encourage people to think about those things that might, encourage them to maybe even create something, or I go look at somebody who is creating something, because you can learn from others. And you can also, the beautiful thing about art is it crosses bridges, it crosses country lines. You learn something about somebody else's experience. And so I think even with that, it gives you knowledge about yourself and others. So my encouragement to others would be to really, and even that, even if you're at home and you just have a pencil and you want to doodle, or you want to, don't be
Yes.
scared to do it. Just try it. You might like, you might hate it. I had a friend of mine who went out and decided to do pottery class, and she just was like, there's no way I could do that. And I was like, well, just go for a day. And, if you make a blob, if you make just something. And she ended up loving it because the process was part of it. It's not always about the end, it's about the process. So, yeah. Mm.
So, listeners, stay in art and find art from everywhere, from the environment, and art is the best healer. So, Rachel, if our listeners want to connect with you, then what's the best way?
Well, you can find me at R Vancelette at Instagram. That's my handle. It's R and my last name, Vanclette. Or you can also find more about everything, that all the projects we do around the world, at our company website, which is vancelette.com or vanglobalart.com. And then INTXPERT is also another project that we have, which is with over 200 creatives around the world. And you can reach out to us at that website, which is intro, and then it's XXPERT without the E.com. And reach out to us, send us a message, give us your feedback, tell us what you think. Send a DM, we're here and available.
Yes, and I will make sure to attach all the links and details below so that our listeners can find them easily. And with that,
Wonderful.
we have come to the end. So, listeners, Rachel reminds us that art isn't just for the walls, it's for the soul. Whether through brush strokes, silence, or a digital creation, healing lives in expression. So today, pick up a pen, play a sound, move your hands, and create. That might just be the meditation your spirit has been waiting for. Until next time, stay open, stay curious, stay connected, and listen to Inner Peace, Better Health. Thank you.